My 8-year-old daughter was left at the airport by my parents while they boarded first class with my sister's kids. The note they left with a gate agent said, "We all voted that she should stay behind." I found her crying alone, clutching her little unicorn backpack. I didn't shout, I did something else. 7 days later, their lives started falling apart, and it was all because of that one single vote. The first sign that something was wrong was the silence. It was a specific kind of silence, the kind that follows a dropped call when you know the other person hung up on you. I had just landed in Orlando, a quick business trip I couldn't get out of, and was expecting a text from my mother. They were all flying to meet me for a week at Disney World: my parents, my sister Chloe, her husband Mark, their two perfect children, and my daughter Lily. A family trip, she'd called it. My treat, of course. It was always my treat. I called my mother's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called my father's. Same thing. My sister's phone rang once, then clicked off. A deep, cold dread began to pool in my stomach. This was their pattern, a coordinated freeze-out. It was a weapon they used whenever I'd failed to meet some unspoken expectation. Family politics are their own kind of minefield, and I'd been navigating it my whole life. Usually, I could figure out my transgression. Had I not sounded enthusiastic enough on the phone last night? Was the hotel not up to Chloe's standards? I sent a text to my mother. Landed. Where are you guys? The little bubble with 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then it appeared again, and vanished. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was deliberate. This was a punishment. But for what? And where was my daughter? My hands were shaking as I pulled up the airline's app. Flight 714 from our home city. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. Arrived 45 minutes ago. They were here. They were in the same airport as me, and they were ignoring my calls. A hot, familiar shame washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of primal fear for Lily. I ran. I sprinted through the terminal, dodging rolling suitcases and confused tourists, my own small carry-on banging against my leg. My mind was a frantic slideshow of horrors. Had something happened to Lily? Was she hurt? Why wouldn't they answer? I felt like I was screaming on the inside, a silent, tearing shriek of panic. I found the arrival gate for their flight. It was mostly empty now, just a few stragglers and the cleaning crew, and then I saw her. A small figure in a pink hoodie, curled up on a hard plastic chair, her face buried in her knees. Her unicorn backpack, the one she loved more than anything, was on the floor beside her. "Lily!" My voice was a choked whisper. Her head snapped up. Her face was blotchy and streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a terror that will be burned into my memory until the day I die. She launched herself off the chair and into my arms, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. I held her, rocking her, my own tears blurring the fluorescent lights of the terminal. The relief was so immense, it was painful, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. She was safe. She was here. "What happened, baby? Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" I asked, my voice trembling. She just shook her head, burying her face in my neck. A gate agent, a woman with tired eyes and a kind face, approached us cautiously. "Are you her mother?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. "Your family. They left this for you." She handed me a folded piece of airline stationery. My mother's neat, condescending handwriting was unmistakable. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a letter. It was a note, a verdict. It read, Lily was being difficult and causing a scene. We couldn't risk her ruining the flight for Chloe's children. We all voted that she should stay behind. The gate agent will watch her until you arrive. We will see you at the hotel. We all voted. The words echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of my mind. They voted on my child, like she was an inconvenience to be discarded, a piece of luggage that wouldn't fit in the overhead bin. They had a meeting, a discussion, and the outcome was to abandon an 8-year-old girl in an airport hundreds of miles from home. I looked down at my daughter, still shuddering in my arms. Her scene was probably a moment of anxiety. She was a sensitive kid, easily overwhelmed by crowds and noise. She wasn't being difficult, she was being 8. And they had punished her for it with an act of cruelty so profound it defied comprehension. In that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud, shattering thing. It was a quiet, clean snap. The part of me that had spent 35 years trying to earn their love, the part that always made excuses for them, the part that played the peacemaker. It just died, right there on the cold linoleum floor of the Orlando International Airport. I didn't scream, I didn't call them, I didn't cry. A strange cold calm settled over me. It was the kind of calm that comes after the storm has passed, and you can finally see the devastation clearly. The truth was a weapon, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to use it. I folded the note, tucked it carefully into my wallet, and picked up my daughter. "It's okay, baby," I whispered into her hair, my voice steady and clear. "Mommy's here, we're going home, and we're never, ever seeing them again. This ends. To understand the vote, you have to understand the system. My family wasn't a family, it was a monarchy, and my sister Chloe was the queen. She was born with a crown I could never see but always felt. I was 2 years older, the responsible one, the serious one. Chloe was the fun one, the spirited one. In our family, spirited was a euphemism for selfish and cruel. I remember my 10th birthday. I had asked for a specific bicycle, a blue Schwinn with a white basket. I'd circled it in the catalog for months. On my birthday morning, there it was. It was perfect. I was ecstatic. Later that afternoon, Chloe, who was 8, threw a tantrum. She wanted the bike. She screamed that it wasn't fair, that I always got everything. My parents exchanged a look I knew well, the "let's just keep the peace" look. My father knelt down beside me, his voice a low, placating murmur. "Honey, you're older. You can understand. Let your sister have a turn." I watched, my throat tight, as Chloe wobbled down the driveway on my bike, a triumphant smirk on her face. She never gave it back. It became her bike. When I cried to my mother, she just sighed and said, "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a bike. Don't ruin your own birthday party." I learned a lesson that day. My feelings were an inconvenience, but Chloe's were a crisis to be managed. This dynamic bled into everything. My straight A's were met with a nod and a "that's nice, dear," while Chloe's C+ was framed and celebrated as a huge improvement. When I won a statewide science fair, my parents missed the award ceremony because Chloe had a minor role in a school play on the same night. They sent me a text message, "Break a leg. Oops, wrong kid. LOL. Congrats, yeah." When I got my first job, I saved diligently. Chloe racked up credit card debt, buying designer clothes. My parents bailed her out, of course, taking out a second mortgage on their house to do it. "She's just figuring things out," my mother explained, as if financial responsibility were some esoteric philosophy. "You've always been so good with money, you understand?" Being the scapegoat meant you were always expected to understand. It meant your stability was the foundation they could stand on while they rushed to cushion Chloe's every fall. The real poison seeped in when we had children. I married a good, quiet man who died far too young, leaving me with a mortgage, a mountain of medical bills, and our beautiful daughter, Lily. I worked 2 jobs, scraped by, and poured every ounce of my being into giving Lily a safe and loving home. Chloe married Mark, a man whose primary personality trait was agreeing with Chloe. They had 2 sons, Jason and Kyle, who were treated like princes. My parents, the doting grandparents, were a constant presence in Chloe's life. They babysat every weekend. They paid for private schools, sports camps, and lavish vacations. For Lily, they offered criticism disguised as advice. "She's so shy," my mother would say with a concerned frown. "You should really get her into more activities." When I explained I couldn't afford it, she'd just wave her hand dismissively. "There are ways, you just have to prioritize." The unspoken truth was that Lily was too much like me. She was quiet, observant, and sensitive. She didn't perform for them the way Chloe's boys did. Jason and Kyle would run in, give loud, sloppy kisses, and demand attention. Lily would hang back, assessing the situation. My parents saw this as a flaw, a defect. Last Christmas was a perfect example. It was at my parents' house, a shrine to Chloe and her perfect family. The walls were covered with photos of them. There was one small, outdated school picture of Lily on a side table, next to a lamp. I had spent weeks saving for Lily's main gift, a beautiful, intricate dollhouse she had dreamed of. When she opened it, her face lit up with a pure, unadulterated joy that made my chest ache. A few minutes later, Chloe's boys opened their gifts from my parents. A brand new PlayStation 5 and an armory of games. They immediately started whooping and tearing at the boxes. My father beamed. "Anything for my grandsons," he said, puffing out his chest. Chloe caught my eye and gave me a little pitying smile. "Cute dollhouse," she said, her tone making it sound like I'd given Lily a cardboard box and some crayons. "Very simple." Later, I found Lily in the guest room, quietly putting her dolls to bed in the new dollhouse. Her cousins were in the living room, screaming at the television. My mother came in and saw Lily playing. You know, she said, leaning against the doorframe, it's a shame she doesn't play with the boys more. She's always off by herself. It's not healthy. She's happy, Mom, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. Is she? She'd replied, her gaze sweeping over the dollhouse with disinterest. She just seems so solitary. That was the core of it. They didn't see a thoughtful, imaginative child. They saw a problem to be solved, a deviation from the loud, boisterous norm set by Chloe's kids. My daughter's very nature was an inconvenience, an annoyance, and at the airport, that annoyance had become great enough to warrant abandonment. The vote wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was the culmination of a lifetime of dismissals, a final formal verdict on my daughter's worth, and on mine. Instead of going to the hotel, I took Lily to a different one near the airport. I ordered room service, her favorite macaroni and cheese, and we watched cartoons. She was quiet, clinging to my side. I didn't press her. I just let her be. My phone buzzed incessantly. A string of texts came through. Mom, where are you? We're at the hotel. Chloe is worried. Mom, are you punishing us? Don't be childish. Lily was impossible. Chloe, seriously? You're ruining this whole trip because Lily had a little meltdown. The boys were so excited to see her. You're being selfish. Dad, your mother is very upset. Call her. The words slid right off me. They felt like they were written in a foreign language from a country I no longer lived in. There was no apology, no concern. Just blame and righteous indignation. You're ruining this. As if this, their perfect curated family vacation, was more important than the well-being of my child. That night, after Lily finally fell into a restless sleep, I sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop illuminating my face. I booked 2 one-way tickets home for the next morning. Then, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my grandmother, my mom's mom. Grandma Eleanor was the matriarch of our family in the truest sense of the word. She was sharp, wealthy from my grandfather's investments, and she suffered no fools. My mother was terrified of her. Eleanor had seen the dynamic with Chloe from the beginning and had never approved. She'd always had a soft spot for me, seeing a quiet strength my own parents willfully ignored. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and alert. It's late. Is everything all right? No, Grandma, I said, and then the dam broke. The cold resolve I'd felt at the airport gave way to a wave of grief and fury. I told her everything, my voice shaking. I told her about the flight, about finding Lily, and then I read her the note. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. It was a heavy silence, the kind that has weight and density. When she finally spoke, her voice was like ice. They did what? They left her there, I whispered. And the note. Read it to me again. I did. I read the words, we all voted, and I heard her inhale sharply. All right, she said, her voice devoid of any emotion now. It was the voice she used when she was closing a business deal. You did the right thing, booking a flight home. Don't go to your house. Come straight to mine. Do you understand me? Do not talk to them. Do not answer their calls. Come to me. Okay, Grandma. And bring the note, she added, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. Ink beats opinions every time. We hung up. I sat there for a moment, the phone heavy in my hand. A weight was leaving my body, not all of it, but some. For the first time, I wasn't alone in this fight. I had an ally, and she was ready for war. The flight home was a blur. Lily slept most of the way, her head on my lap, one hand clutching my shirt. I watched her little face, the faint tear tracks still visible on her cheeks, and the cold resolve returned, harder and sharper than before. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting her from the poison I had been swimming in my whole life. You don't need armor when you're fighting for your child. You just need to be willing to burn down the world to keep them safe. Grandma Eleanor lived in a large old house filled with dark wood, antique books, and the smell of lemon polish and old money. It was a house of quiet, unshakable stability. She met us at the door, her posture ramrod straight. She didn't hug me. She wasn't a sentimental woman. Instead, she knelt down to Lily's level. Hello, little bird, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. I have your room ready. There's a new book on your nightstand and cookies in the kitchen. Lily, who was usually so shy, gave her a small, watery smile and let my grandmother lead her inside. Eleanor had always been the one person who knew how to speak Lily's language. Once Lily was settled, Eleanor led me into the study. It was my grandfather's old office, lined with law books and financial ledgers. It felt like a war room. She closed the heavy oak doors behind us. "The note," she said. It wasn't a question. I handed it to her. She put on her reading glasses and read it, her expression unreadable. She read it twice, then laid it carefully on the polished mahogany desk as if it were a piece of evidence at a trial, which I was beginning to realize it was. "This is a declaration of war," she said flatly, "and they are going to lose." "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice small. She looked at me, her gaze sharp. "We are not going to yell, we are not going to plead, we are not going to talk it out. Those are their weapons. We are going to use ours. We are going to use facts, finances, and the law." She walked over to a large, locked filing cabinet in the corner. "Your grandfather was a meticulous man," she said, turning a key in the lock. "He didn't trust your father's judgment, and he positively despised your sister's entitlement. He set things up, carefully." She pulled out a thick, leather-bound binder labeled Family Trust. My heart started to beat a little faster. I knew of the trust, of course. It was a vague, abstract thing my parents occasionally mentioned, usually in the context of how they were managing it for the grandchildren's future. Eleanor opened the binder on the desk. "Your grandfather established this trust to provide for the education and well-being of his great-grandchildren, all of them, equally." She tapped a clause on the first page. "Your parents, Patricia and Robert, are the trustees. They have the authority to disburse funds. However," she flipped several pages, her finger landing on a paragraph of dense legal text, "I am the executor. Any expenditure over $5,000 requires my written approval, and they are required to submit a detailed annual accounting to me, which," she said, looking up at me over her glasses, "they have not done for the past 3 years." A knot of dread and something else, a flicker of dark, vindictive curiosity, tightened in my gut. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, pulling out a thinner folder from the cabinet, "that I did my own digging when the report stopped coming. These are bank statements I subpoenaed from the trust's accounts." She spread them out on the desk. They were a roadmap of my family's priorities. There were payments to Chloe's mortgage company, a 5-figure wire transfer to a luxury car dealership, a massive withdrawal, over $70,000, to a landscape and pool construction company. My stomach dropped. I remembered Chloe's smug posts on social media a few months ago. A sprawling new patio, a glistening in-ground saltwater pool. "Just a little backyard upgrade," her caption had read. So blessed. "They used the trust money," I whispered. "Money for Lily, for her college." "They used it for Chloe," Eleanor corrected me, her voice like flint. "They have drained nearly $250,000 from this trust, and I can guarantee you not 1 cent of it has gone towards anything for Lily. This isn't just a betrayal, my dear. This is felony embezzlement." I stared at the papers, at the cold, hard numbers that told a story of breathtaking greed and favoritism. All those years I'd struggled, clipping coupons, working late nights, worrying about how I'd ever afford to send Lily to a good university. And all along, this money, her money, was being siphoned away to fund my sister's perfect, Instagrammable life. The pieces clicked into place: the first-class tickets to Orlando, the suite at the expensive Disney hotel. They weren't just being cruel when they left Lily behind. They were being practical. They were protecting their investment. Lily, the quiet, inconvenient child, was a threat to the fantasy life they had stolen for Chloe. A crying child might draw unwanted attention, and a single mother asking too many questions might upset the delicate balance of their fraud. I looked up from the bank statements and met my grandmother's gaze. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching bruise on my soul. But it was being crowded out by something else. A cold, clear rage, a resolve that felt like steel reinforcing my spine. "They're having a party," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Next Saturday, a pool reveal party." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Grandma Eleanor's face. "How perfectly theatrical," she said. "We'll need to prepare, and we will need a guest of honor." She picked up her phone and dialed. "Arthur, it's Eleanor. I need you to cancel your afternoon. We have a new client." She looked at me, and she is highly motivated. The next 7 days were a blur of quiet, focused activity. Arthur Vance was my grandmother's lawyer, a man who looked less like an attorney and more like a retired bulldog who had seen it all. He had jowls, a permanent scowl, and an aura of absolute, merciless competence. He listened to the story, examined the note, and reviewed the trust documents with a series of grim, satisfied grunts. "It's open and shut," he declared, peering at me over his spectacles. "Breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, fraud. It's a buffet of litigation. What's the goal here? A slap on the wrist, or do you want to burn it all down?" "I want my daughter's money back," I said, my voice hard. "And I want them to face consequences." Grandma Eleanor chimed in. "We want them removed as trustees, the embezzled funds returned to the trust with interest, and we want it done in the most public way possible." Arthur grinned, a terrifying sight. "I love my job," he said. While Arthur drew up the legal documents, cease and desist orders, a formal petition to the court to remove my parents as trustees, a demand letter for repayment, I collected my own evidence. I went through years of my own bank statements, highlighting every check I'd ever written to my parents to help out, every loan that was never repaid. I screenshotted Chloe's social media, documenting the lavish vacations, the designer bags, the brand new car, all posted with hashtags like #blessed and #hardworkpaysoff. It was a digital diary of their lies, and it was damning. Meanwhile, my phone continued to be a portal to their alternate reality. They had returned from Orlando, and the messages shifted from anger to a cloying, manipulative sweetness. "Mom, we're home. We missed you at Disney. The boys kept asking for Lily." Chloe: "Hey, hope you're not still mad. Things just got stressful. Let's talk." Mom: "Are you coming to the pool party on Saturday? Please don't let this little misunderstanding ruin it. We're family. A little misunderstanding." As if abandoning a child was the equivalent of forgetting to pick up milk. The gaslighting was so audacious, it was almost impressive. I didn't reply to any of them. My silence was my new power. It was driving them crazy. They were used to me explaining, justifying, apologizing. They had no idea how to handle a version of me that simply refused to engage. The day of the party, a strange calm descended upon me. I got Lily dressed in a simple sundress. I dressed myself in a plain black dress. It felt appropriate, like I was attending a funeral, the funeral for the family I thought I had. Grandma Eleanor was already waiting for us in the driveway, standing beside her immaculate vintage Mercedes. She was wearing a tailored Chanel suit and an expression of grim determination. Arthur was in the driver's seat. He nodded at me. "Ready?" "Yes," I said. I looked at Lily. "You okay to stay with Mrs. Gable for a few hours, honey?" Mrs. Gable was Eleanor's kind, elderly housekeeper. Lily nodded. "Are you going to talk to Grandma Patricia?" she asked, her voice small. I knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "Yes, and I'm going to make sure they can never, ever hurt you again." She seemed to understand. She hugged me tight. "Okay, Mommy." As we drove towards my parents' house, the house I grew up in, I felt no nostalgia, no sadness, just a quiet, humming sense of purpose. You can smell a renovation the way you can smell a lie. The air around the house was thick with the scent of fresh mulch, chlorine, and self-congratulation. Cars lined the street. My parents had invited everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. The flying monkeys all assembled to witness the coronation. We parked down the block and walked up the driveway. Arthur carried a sleek leather briefcase. We walked through the side gate into the backyard. It was exactly as I'd pictured from Chloe's photos. A massive, kidney-shaped pool shimmered an unnatural blue. New lounge chairs were artfully arranged on a patio of expensive-looking flagstones. A catered buffet was set up under a tent. My father was at a brand-new stainless steel grill, wearing a Kiss the Cook apron, holding court. Chloe was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, while Mark nodded sycophantically beside her. And my mother, the Queen Regent, was flitting between groups of people, accepting compliments like she was hosting a talk show. When she saw us, her smile flickered for a fraction of a second. Then it returned, brighter and more brittle than before. "There you are!" she exclaimed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We were so worried. I'm so glad you decided not to hold a grudge." She moved to hug me. I took a half step back. "Hello, Mother." Her smile tightened. My father and Chloe had noticed our arrival. The low hum of party chatter began to falter as people sensed a shift in the atmosphere. "Well, this is a surprise," Chloe said, sauntering over. Her eyes flicked dismissively over my simple dress, then landed on my grandmother. "Eleanor, and you brought your lawyer? A bit dramatic, don't you think?" I think it's perfectly appropriate, Grandma Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the air like chilled steel. We're here to discuss a financial matter. My father bustled over, wiping his hands on his apron. Now, whatever this is, it can wait. We have guests. No, Robert, Arthur Vance said, stepping forward. His voice was not loud, but it commanded attention. It can't wait. He opened his briefcase. The sound of the latches clicking open was sharp and ugly in the suddenly quiet yard. He looked directly at my parents. Patricia and Robert, as trustees of the Eleanor Vance Family Trust, you have engaged in a consistent and flagrant pattern of misappropriation of funds. A collective gasp went through the assembled family members. My mother's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, Arthur said calmly. He pulled out a sheaf of papers. Let's start with the $72,450 paid to Paradise Pools and Patios, shall we? He gestured with the papers towards the glistening monument to their fraud. A lovely addition to the house. I'm sure the great-grandchildren, for whom this money was intended, will appreciate it when they can't afford college tuition. My father's jaw clenched. That was a loan. We were going to pay it back. A loan? Arthur raised an eyebrow. There's no loan agreement, no repayment schedule, and most damningly, no approval from the executor, as required by the terms of the trust. He turned his gaze to my sister. And Chloe, the $48,000 for the down payment on your new SUV. Was that a loan as well? Chloe's mouth fell open. Mark looked like he was about to be sick. That was a gift, Chloe stammered, looking at my mother for support. My mother rallied, her voice rising with indignation. This is a private family matter. You have no right to come here and ruin this party. You forfeited your right to privacy when you committed fraud, Grandma Eleanor said coldly. She stepped forward. For years, I have watched you coddle one daughter while you punished the other. I watched you shower your favored grandchildren with gifts while ignoring the one who needed you most. But I never imagined you would stoop to theft. Then I spoke. My voice was quiet, but it carried. You left my daughter at the airport. All eyes turned to me. You held a vote and you abandoned her. I pulled the note from my pocket. The crumpled piece of airline stationery. I held it up. You wrote this. My Aunt Carol squinted at it. What does it say? I read it aloud. Lily was being difficult and causing a scene. We couldn't risk her ruining the flight for Chloe's children. We all voted that she should stay behind. A horrified silence fell over the yard. You could hear the hum of the pool filter. My Uncle Steve, my father's brother, looked at my parents with disgust. You did what? My mother's face drained of all color. It was the pale face moment. The instant the lie dies and the ugly truth is laid bare for all to see. It wasn't like that, she insisted, her voice shrill with panic. She was screaming. We didn't know what to do. You're twisting things. I'm quoting you directly, I said, my voice flat. This is who you are. This is what you do. You sacrifice anyone and anything for Chloe's comfort. Arthur Vance stepped forward again, holding a thick envelope. Patricia and Robert, he said, his voice ringing with finality. You've been served. He handed the envelope to my father, who took it with a trembling hand. This is a petition to have you removed as trustees, a formal demand for the repayment of $241,000, and a notice that a full forensic audit of the trust is underway. The accounts have been frozen. My mother looked at my grandmother, her eyes pleading. Mother, please, don't do this. We're family. Family doesn't abandon an 8-year-old child, Eleanor retorted. Family doesn't steal from their own grandchildren. Chloe rounded on me, her face a mask of fury. You did this. You've ruined everything. I just looked at her. All the fear I ever had of her, all the years of intimidation and belittling, it was all gone. She was just a spoiled woman having a tantrum because her stolen toys were being taken away. No, I said. It was the easiest, most powerful word I had ever spoken. We turned and walked away. The party was over. As we reached the gate, I could hear the shouting start behind us, the recriminations, the accusations, the sound of a kingdom crumbling. I didn't look back. The aftermath was swift and brutal. My parents, deprived of the trust fund slush they had come to depend on, were financially ruined. The legal fees alone were crippling. To repay the money they had stolen, they had to sell the house. The house I grew up in, the one they had filled with pictures of Chloe, was sold to strangers to pay for their crimes. They moved into a small, sad rental apartment across town. Chloe and Mark were hit just as hard. Without my parents' illicit financial backing, their lifestyle collapsed. They had to sell their new SUV. They couldn't afford the payments on their oversized house, which was now a monument to their greed, with a pool they couldn't afford to maintain. Mark had to take a second job, driving for a rideshare service. Chloe, who hadn't worked a day in her adult life, was forced to get a job in retail. I heard from a cousin that she complained constantly about how unfair it all was. They never once apologized, they only regretted being caught. The social fallout was just as devastating. The story of the party, the note, and the embezzlement spread like wildfire through our extended family and their social circles. The flying monkeys scattered. No one wanted to be associated with them. They were pariahs, ostracized for a cruelty, and agreed that even their most ardent supporters couldn't defend. And us? We were free. With Grandma Eleanor and Arthur's help, the trust was restored. As the new trustee, Eleanor ensured Lily's portion was secured in a separate account, untouchable by anyone but her. She also released a portion of my own inheritance, which my grandfather had stipulated I receive upon, demonstrating full independence from my parents' negative influence. It seemed leaving them was the final test. I used the money to buy a small house in a quiet neighborhood on the other side of the state. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was ours. It had a little garden in the back and a sunny window in the kitchen. We painted Lily's room a soft lavender, and we filled the walls with her drawings, not pictures of other, more favored children. The change in Lily was the greatest victory. The anxiety that had clung to her like a shadow began to recede. She made friends at her new school. She started sleeping through the night. The haunted look in her eyes was replaced by a happy, confident sparkle. She was free from the weight of their judgment, free to just be a kid. Life became quiet. It became boring in the best possible way. Our weekends were filled with trips to the library, baking cookies, and working in our little garden. There were no more passive-aggressive phone calls, no more holidays filled with simmering tension, no more feeling like we had to audition for love and acceptance. There was just peace, an earned peace that felt more valuable than any amount of money. Sometimes I think about that note. We all voted. They thought it was a verdict on my daughter's worth, but they were wrong. It was a verdict on their character. It was the ink that signed their own social and financial death warrant. They didn't just abandon a little girl in an airport. They abandoned any claim they had to our lives, our love, and our forgiveness. And in doing so, they gave us the greatest gift we could ever have received, the chance to start over truly and completely on our own. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.